Great. So this evening session is recorded, and the reason we do that is so that we can use clips of some of our content around media, speaking and training for the media with a wider audience than those who can make it this evening, and also give people a little flavour of what it's like when we do these sessions, get some more people along. So this session's recorded, and I've just popped the recording on now. The bits that you share, question and answers, any challenges you're having, we'll edit those bits out, so don't worry about that. When we're in this space together, please be mindful that it's a multi-party space, that politics is about representing and working with lots of different people with different views. So we invite you to stay curious and respectful in the room tonight. Um, Confidentiality is really important. So if you're hearing another candidate share about some of the challenges they're having out on the campaign trail, please keep those to yourself and don't share them outside of this room. We love it if you can have your camera on as much as possible. Totally fine if you need to dip out for a second. But we really love the feeling of this being a workshop and as if we're all in the room together. It's really helpful for accessibility if you can make sure you're on mute when you're not speaking. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Do use the chat to ping us, tell us how it's going, send love to anyone. You can use the emojis. It's nice to kind of make the space feel a bit dynamic, especially when we're kind of listening to some of the content. In terms of accessibility, we have the closed captions enabled for this session. So if you would like to, please make use of those. And if you have any other accessibility challenges to the session, do drop me a note. I can be in charge of that. Is there anything else to say on the housekeeping front? I think that's it. We're delighted to see you here this evening. We know that for many of you, this is an extremely busy time. So I'm Katie, I'm Programme Manager at Elect here. So I oversee our support for women at all stages, but particularly this stage, like how we support women into elected offices, like what I'm super passionate about. I've spent 7 years working with women through this kind of tricky and intense and gorgeous phase, and it's something that really matters to me a lot. I think it's important to mention as well that I have had experience doing kind of media campaigns in different settings, and it's really fantastic that we're joined with Jeffrey here today. He's going to give us some of the key things you need to know if you're preparing for a media interview. So in a second, we'd love to hear kind of what brings you here tonight, and if this is something that you have on the cards, like if you've got a media interview on the cards. So I'd love to give you a second to tell us your name, your party, and which election you're standing in. Fab. Okay, so we're really pleased this evening to be joined by Jeffrey. Jeff told me that if I call him Jeffrey, he'll think he's in trouble. So I'm going to keep trying to call him Jeff because he's not yet in trouble. And Jeff is a fantastic inclusion consultant, media trainer, and freelance journalist. He's previously been head of media at Europe's largest LGBTQ plus charity and has created and delivered media training sessions to over 60 organizations and individuals across the public, private, and third sector, including some of our friends. He came highly recommended from some of the organizations that we love to work with. And so we jumped on the call together, and we really felt like he was on the same wavelength as us, and he had a lot to offer in terms of his experience speaking with media and preparing other people to speak with media. So we are really excited to have you here today, Jeff. Is there anything else I need to say before I hand over to you to kick off?
I don't think so. I think that's everything. It's really nice to have you all here. I'm very excited and grateful to be here with you for the next hour. So maybe I will start
Yay!
sharing my screen. Yeah, appreciate everyone being here. Um, so yeah, as Kay so brilliantly said, I've worked in sort of media comms advocacy for about 15 years. I also do some work as a journalist, writing for places like the BBC and the Guardian and GQ. So this training is sort of developed from that. And the aim and hope of today's training is this is going to be a lot more sort of like theory and content in terms of like if you had a media interview, how you prepare and things you can think about. And then we can hopefully sort of Katie and I can talk towards the end about how we put this into practice sort of moving forward. I also will apologize if I cough. I'm recovering from a cold. My voice is not usually this deep. It's usually slightly higher, so you get a slightly deeper voice, but I sometimes am prone to, for effect, coughing right now. So I apologize for that. Um, as sort of Katie said, I'd be curious to hear if anyone wants to speak off mute or just use the chat function. Sort of pick one. Do any of you have media interviews coming up, or what's your experience with media interviews? If that's not so relevant to you right now, maybe why are you here today, and what are you hoping to get out of the session? So if anyone wants to come off mute and chat, let me know. Otherwise, just put some answers in the chat just so we can get to know a little bit more. You can do media interviews, not back out. Yeah, and hopefully like feeling more confident is something we're gonna hopefully get for all of you as we go through the session. If anyone wants to put more in the chat or say anything, let me know. But I might, you know, conscious of time, it is evening, and I will keep us sort of moving forward. So in terms of the agenda, I've sort of picked out. I'm almost going to think of this like a greatest hits album, and I may be thinking of that because I've been very into ABBA's Gold album recently. So I'm like, this is like I normally run sessions that are like 3 hours to like a full day, and obviously we have an hour. So I was like, what are the most essential things that I think to think about for you all to give you some of that confidence, how you prepare, and these are the things we're going to cover. So some physical and mental preparation, how you think about what you want to say, how you stay on message if you think you're going to get annoying, hostile questions, and then hopefully at the end we'll have a little bit of time for some Q&A. Again, we're doing whistle stop greatest hits tour here. Um, First things first, just a reminder, a helpful reminder when it comes to media interviews. I will just, some of you may notice, apologies, there's a little bit of swearing in this, um, but there's something to
Does
be
anyone
noticed.
ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their arse and done nothing? No signs of that, no? They'll be safe as soon as they're mitigated, but then the next question is, what's the time period to either refurbish or rebuild? So we'll be well, each one of those we'll have to work on case by case. So first of all, we're going to get them made say, for a rebuild it could, but quite a few of them, it's only a partial refurbishment. But I don't have all of that right now, but we will get a plan and every single one of them will be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their arse and done nothing? No signs of that?
So a clip of Gillian Keegan went viral, and Channel 4 used it as a news story after they were interviewing her about concrete in schools, which is, I think, just a friendly reminder that if you're ever in a room with journalists or being interviewed by journalists, even if you're not officially being recorded, everything is possibly being recorded. So I like to think of it, unless you're like 50 feet away from them, or like the phone's been off and you double checked it like 8 times, don't say anything that you would feel uncomfortable going on air. So just always remember everything with the journalist is sort of like, even if, walking from the room to the studio, the entrance to the studio, whatever that might be, always thinking about that. Just a fun little reminder of what could happen. So, um, confidence and credibility, what it means to prepare for media interviews, to obviously deal with some of the stress that you feel physically and mentally going into an interview, and some techniques that I think about. Now, one of the things that I think often stresses people out when it comes to media interviews is I think often people approach media interviews as if they're tests or like exams of knowledge. And while it is true that you may be tested on some of your knowledge and you do need to know facts and figures and what you're talking about, media interviews are also, they should actually be seen more as an opportunity. I mean, particularly in the instance for the work that you are all doing, like it's a chance to advocate for an opinion and a view to shape what people think and how people view yourself, your party, what you're running for, or how they think problems in the local area should be solved. And that is a really like key difference, because sometimes I think people spend a lot of time thinking about all of the possible answers or what's the right answer, and there is no such thing as a right answer in media interviews. There's obviously truth and fiction, but how, and I think, as we will understand, and I think Katie in some ways alluded to, is like all of you will come from different walks of life and political backgrounds. So how you approach different parties or your party's positions on different issues will be different. And good media interview prep is about thinking about how you articulate those answers in the way that you feel best represents yourself and not trying to adhere to a particular version of what you think is the right thing to say. And some other differences is often um, when you're doing media interviews, you need to look at every question as being an opportunity to land the key messages and the things that you directly want to get across. And the interviewer, even if they're asking you annoying questions, you always have to keep in mind that the actual target and the people that you're trying to reach are the people listening, watching, reading. Um, so making sure that you don't get too trapped in like a one-on-one with the interviewer and always thinking about the people on the other side listening. Um, as some people have alluded to, interview questions are often not neutral. Journalists will be coming at them from their own particular political perspective, the viewpoint of the community that they're looking at. So keeping that in mind can be helpful. Exam questions, there's just sort of like neutral answers, neutral questions. This is not the same. And particularly in media interviews, clarity and brevity are often more important because, you may be doing an interview for 5 minutes max. You don't have time to cover every policy detail, every issue in that. And actually, particularly for people listening or watching, they don't really care that much about that detail. They want to hear much more about why the issue matters, what's important about it, what they need to know. And so, and I think there's often an expectation, particularly on women, to answer more details, to feel that, to focus on completeness. But actually, the best media interviews are often those that can combine clarity and brevity with some depth of knowledge, but not sort of, bringing it back to the sort of main points and arguments that you need to make that people need to be aware of. So I want to kind of get rid of this idea that media interviews are tests and actually put forward the idea that these are really golden opportunities for you to advocate for what you care about and what you're running for and what your party is running for in these interviews. And so one of the things that I often encourage people to do is if you are approached to do an interview, is sometimes the response from most people is, well, what questions are they going to ask me? And so some people have gotten into a habit of always asking journalists, like, what questions are you going to ask me? And I think that's the wrong way to approach if you're asked to be um interviewed. I think if you are happy to do the interview, you can always go back to that journalist and say, this is obviously, I put an example here of the national government's consultation on banning social media for under 16s, like write down in an email or a text or whatever it is to just say, happy to speak to you about this. My initial thoughts are, or my position or my party's position is one, two, three. Because what that does is it allows the journalist to understand where you're coming from and what you want to deliver in the interview. And so if you were to say, my initial thoughts are, I think a consultation is a good way to get lots of different views on whether we think a ban is appropriate. But the first question a journalist might ask you might be, so you think a ban, that you think that this consultation is a good thing. Why do you think that is? You can almost um, sort of like almost like Jedi mind trick journalists into asking questions that relate to what you want to talk about. Because personally, from like a journalist side, it's always useful to have some understanding of when I'm interviewing someone, what position they're going to come from, what they want to talk about, because then I can understand maybe how to not just shape my questions to what they want to talk about, but actually how do I, like, what is it that they need to say or they're going to say, and is that useful for what I'm talking about and what I'm writing? And I think can give you a little bit more power in terms of feeling like you um you have some control. And I think often people treat media interviews as if the person being interviewed has no power. And actually you do, because journalists are coming to you for a reason. They want to hear from you. And the more you're able to feel assured that you have good things to say, worthy things to say, and you focus on what you're trying to advocate for rather than trying to come up with the best answer to every question, I think is a really helpful tool to sort of take back some of the power and stress that comes in interviews. Um, does that sound okay to anyone? Does anyone have any questions? See some nodding heads. All good? Okay. So yeah, so one thing I like to, when it comes to preparation is just you have some power and control, and thinking about what you want to say is a really important like step in approaching interviews. Now, when it comes to mentally preparing yourself, I think there's one thing to say, which is that, of course, you can always say no to an interview. And by that, I don't mean you should say no to every interview. What I mean is that um, if for whatever reason, whether for personal reasons, professional reasons, something comes up and you said yes to doing an interview, maybe you said yes a few times, but even 5 minutes before you feel something's come up and you're not in a good headspace to do the interview. It is always better from my perspective to do an interview in a good headspace and feeling confident about it than feeling like you're boxed in and have to do it. But no shouldn't be an excuse to not doing it, because these are really important opportunities to get your message out there. But always remember that you can say no if you need to. In terms of other things, I think to help deal with some of the mental stress, um, giving yourself time and space before and after an interview to decompress, to prepare, is really important. I think sometimes people underestimate the mental stress that comes with doing an interview. And I want to, um, make sure you have a little bit of time, whether to do some breathing exercises, meditation, you have something afterwards, just to really, give yourself the time and space and the headspace you need to be in the right frame of mind. One thing that I always think is appropriate and important to think about is um, you are all running for public office, and um, it's always good to think about if there are aspects of your personal life that you wouldn't want to share publicly, and what those sort of red lines are, whether that be things about family, job history, education, like any of those things, because if once it's out in public, it's much harder to take back. Obviously, you kind of can't. And so, I have worked with people running for public office, people in the public sphere, and they have, you know, they will talk about their family in broad strokes, but they won't talk about specific family members or like how many family members they have, because that's just like a red line for them. And so thinking about those, and if necessary, reiterating those to journalists. Um, some people find it helpful to run through questions you might get asked, and then where possible, just doing some research on the interviewer to see if they have, if you can find previous interviews they've done, it can be helpful to get a sense of where they might be coming from and how they might approach the interview. Um, any questions, comments on that? All okay? Okay. Trisha, I'm relying on you as the feedback person. If anyone, I'm checking everyone else, but you're all off screen, which is totally fine. So I'm just Trisha's representing all of you right now. Um, in terms of on-camera confidence, there's a couple of things to think about. Now, one is what you wear. And I think at this point, I always talk about in all of my trainings and different things is people from minority backgrounds, particularly women, women of color. Um, when you're in the public sphere, there are different expectations or ways in which some people watching or listening um, might think about whether or not you are credible, you are authoritative, or like the the lipstick you wear might like be off-putting for people. And so all of this advice is sort of done with the caveat and understanding that sometimes there is no pleasing some people. And to me, thinking about what you wear and how you present yourself is to me, it's more important like how you dress, if you do hair, makeup, all of those things, it's actually more about you feeling comfortable and confident in yourself. Speaking for myself, you will never catch me wearing a suit and tie. That is never, and for like the 1% of people that think someone in a suit and tie is smarter, I am not going to do it because I feel really uncomfortable. And I've done, hundreds of media interviews. You will probably see me just in a nice shirt or a nice jumper. because that's how I feel more confident. And it's that sort of way of thinking about how you present yourself. I almost like think of it as like there's like almost like an on-stage persona of who you adopt and how you present yourself. Um, so that's sort of thinking about sort of what you wear. When it comes to body language, um, maintain 90, basically like almost 100% eye contact. And it's much easier to do in person, um, than it is to do, um, and yeah, Lillian, if you prefer a certain tie combo, absolutely. Like this is everyone wear what you want to wear. That's my personal experience. I think other people look great in those things. I just hate how I look. Um, you basically want to maintain 90% eye contact, which I will say from the jump, when you have to do it online, basically just means you're having a staring contest with your little pinhole camera, either in your phone or on your laptop or your tablet. And it is so uncomfortable. And what I often do is put like two sticky notes on either side of my camera with arrows pointing at them to just remind myself to look that way, because otherwise you'll just see me like, and then all the audience sees is me not looking at them. So you essentially like do little tricks to make sure your eyes look that way. When we talk about open body language, what I mean is, you don't have your like arms crossed and sort of look hunched in. You want to have sort of a relaxed, um, body open gestures, hands sort of forward on your lap. Um, when I say smile with caveats, what I mean is not to say you need to, be welcomed in every interview and have a huge smile. I often encourage people to do what I will describe the words and then you can all look at my lips, which is you have a neutral lip with a slight upturn, which looks like this. And essentially, the idea is like I don't ever want to force anyone to be like, you have to have like smiling. Some people don't really like smiling or like open teeth smiling. And it's just to have like a nice warm presence when you're on camera. But also you might be asked to talk about something that's really serious in your constituency, in your community. And if you are being asked to talk about that, it's probably not the best time to be having like, hey, this is Maya. You need to show, that I think that sort of like neutral, slight smile sort of conveys um sort of some gravitas and understanding of the situation. Um, if you are thinking about your posture, you want to have your sort of shoulders relaxed and sit closer towards the edge of your seat rather than at the very back, because that can sometimes encourage us to slouch. If you are someone who crosses your legs at your knees, I always encourage people to cross them at your ankles, because if you're nervous and you start uncrossing and crossing your legs, your body will start to shift in the frame, whereas that doesn't happen with your ankles. If you don't cross your legs, I often encourage people to, if you imagine your feet are on like parallel train tracks, you have one slightly in front and one slightly behind, it will sort of lean your body forward. Um, and that will put you into a slight state of kind of like alertness. Um, the other thing to say when it comes to on-camera stuff, if you're doing things on Zoom or Skype, is just check that your camera is at eye level. Right now, mine is obviously slightly below me. So if I was to do an interview, I'd probably get some books or something. And then, so I could have my camera up to here and I'd be more at eye level, which is just more professional and what people will be looking for.